Welcome to today's webinar, CARES Act Federal Funding, How, When, and Why to Apply, presented by Synovia Solutions. I'm Josh DeLucia with School Bus Fleet, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. I encourage you to ask questions during the webinar at any point, and we will try to address them all. However, if we do not get to yours, don't worry, you'll be contacted by email with a response after the event. Our presenters for today are Andy Gall and Phyllis Jordan. Andy Gall, who spent decades as a technology integrator with one of Indiana's most respected school districts, will join Phyllis to speak about how schools can use CARES Act funding to improve their technology adoption. Andy now serves as an account executive with Synovia Solutions. Phyllis Jordan is the communications manager for the Center for Children and Families, as well as the editorial director for another Georgetown University center called Future Ed. Jordan served in senior editing positions at the Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post. Jordan has served as the communications director at Attendance Works, a nonprofit focused on improving the policy, research, and practice around school attendance, and she has served as a vice president of the Hatcher Group, a communications firm that works exclusively with foundations and nonprofit organizations. At Hatcher, Jordan worked on education initiatives across print, digital, and social media platforms, including the crafting of a communication strategy for the Campaign for Grade-Level Reading to Improve Early Literacy. We will also have Brian Mitchell of Synovia Solutions joining us as your host today. Now, I'll hand it over to Brian.
Josh, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. And thank you all out there across the country who are taking your most valuable resource, your time, and joining us for this educational opportunity. As you heard there, we're going to have a tremendous opportunity to learn from one of the foremost thinkers in this space as it relates to Phyllis and her expertise as it relates to K-12 funding, especially after all of the COVID relief funds. But first, I want to educate you all very briefly on Synovia Solutions and CalAmp, who is very pleased to bring you this presentation today. Synovia Solutions was born 20 years ago this year when we put our very first GPS tracking unit on a single bus in downtown Indianapolis private school. And today we've grown to serve more than 1,000 districts and have devices on over 100,000 buses. But more importantly than devices, we have software solutions that help schools, families, districts, private school bus contractors, and really anyone associated with the safer transport of children to and from school perform better at their job and feel better about children getting on and off the bus every day. A lot of people know us for the Here Comes the Bus app that really revolutionized the industry with real-time school bus tracking delivered via a mobile app. And last year, in response to the COVID-19 crisis, we launched Bus Guardian, which allowed school districts to do real-time contact tracing and hygiene verification for the school bus. Our parent company, CalAmp, has been in the GPS tracking space for 40 years and has a global customer base that includes more than 10,000 vehicles tracked. We are very proud of our history of innovation and customer focus. And what that means to us as it relates to customer focus is knowing what's important to our customer. In this presentation, we believe that what's important to our customer is knowing how to both secure and efficiently spend CARES Act dollars. As you're about to hear from Phyllis, there are billions of dollars at play here as it relates to getting students back into the classroom where we all know they will learn best. But we also know that school bus drivers are a huge part of that equation. Earlier this year, we launched our Bus Guardian Hero program because we heard unequivocally from so many of you the role your school bus drivers were playing in getting kids back to school safely. So when this presentation ends, please go to busguardian.com/hero and nominate one of your drivers for a chance to win a $250 gift card as our Bus Guardian Hero. We launched the program 6 weeks ago and have 756 nominations as of this morning. So it's been a runaway hit, and it's going to be hard to choose our Bus Guardian Hero because we've been overwhelmed with the response and the number of Bus Guardian heroes and communities out there coast to coast. So thank you for everyone who's nominated. And please, when this is completed, take a moment to nominate someone from your fleet as a Bus Guardian Hero. When I began this process a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, actually, excuse me, I wanted to find experts who could provide value both to our customers and our prospects and help them decipher what I truly believe is an avalanche of funding. And you'll see some of that avalanche detailed to you here by Phyllis, who I'm going to allow to introduce herself, and then over to Andy Gall.
Thanks a lot, Brian. I'm happy to be here today. I imagine I'm a sort of expert. As you heard, my background's in journalism. I'm now an editorial director for this think tank. And about a year ago, when the CARES Act first passed, I'm like, why don't we write something about what's in it for schools? And I have just continued since then. There have been numerous plans. There have been lots of twists and turns. I keep updating this piece. It's gotten something like 200,000 hits on our website. So I've gotten so that people start to call me and tell me stuff that's happening. So I've gotten so that I talk the lingo. And before I start, I wanted to sort of share some of the lingo of what people, as I talk, so you know what I'm talking about. The CARES Act was approved last March, right when the pandemic was starting, and that money needs to be spent by September 2022. CRSA, which is sometimes called CARES 2 because that's a really ugly acronym they've got, that's sort of the second round. That was approved in December of this past year, and not December, a few months ago, and that needs to be obligated by 2023. The American Rescue Plan, which is Biden's stimulus plan, was just passed, and that money needs to be obligated by September 2024. ESSER is the part of the money that goes to elementary and secondary schools, and emergency relief is the rest of that acronym. But a lot of people will talk about ESSER. We'll talk about ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3. Those are the 3 rounds of funding. GEAR is governor's money. In the first 2 rounds, there was discretionary money that went to the governors, and governors spent some of it on various initiatives. That's only in the first 2 rounds. The American Rescue Plan didn't have anything for governors except for some funding for private schools. And then Title I funding is the formula that determines how it's based on poverty, and it's how the federal government funds most schools. The CARES Act, or the COVID relief money, all flows through the Title I formula. It's not technically Title I money, but that's how it's determined. So schools with high levels of poverty and districts with high concentrated poverty are going to get more money than other districts are. So now that we've got that out of the way, this slide looks at how much education money for K12 schools is in each plan. You'll see, $30 billion up to $82 billion. No, that's for all of education. That includes higher ed. For K12, it's 13.2, 54, 126 billion in the latest one. There's other money that's not in the education section. For instance, the December package, CRSA, CARES 2, had $2 billion for bus operators, which can include motor coaches, and it can include school buses. So there's other money tucked in other places, but I'm talking about the education money. And if you want to have a sense of how it compares, the typical money that flows from the federal government works out to about $640 per student each year. The CARES Act gave about $270. CRSA gave $1,100, and the American Rescue Plan $2,600. So we're talking about a lot more money than schools have ever had. And it's all coming in this sort of 3-year period. After 2024, they're not going to have the money to spend. So it may make some sense for folks to spend it in ways that like one-time purchases or facilities upgrades or buying new equipment. Along the lines, there are a lot of allowable uses for COVID relief aid. It's incredible. You can drive a school bus through it. This is the one. The second one is the one I like: providing resources principals need to address coronavirus. That's very broad. There's PPE and cleaning equipment. There's hardware and software for remote and hybrid learning. This latest round really emphasizes learning loss. and it sets aside specific money for after-school and summer learning programs. If the education department, a lot of people were asking, is this okay? Is this okay to spend money on? So they came up with these 5 questions for districts to consider. Is this going to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus? That's very broad. Is it allowable use under the CARES Act? If it is, it's allowable under the other 2 rounds. Is it reasonable and necessary? Does it promote equity? And, does it support getting kids back in school? So those are questions as you're thinking about, whether what you want to spend money on is appropriate. Think about these questions. A lot of states are providing information about what money can be spent on, what their priorities are. Here's something Georgia put out that looks at how, the sort of things they're really interested in, and some ideas for districts and contractors and people who work with districts for what the money can be spent on. Now, the big question is who's making these decisions. A lot of people have asked me, how do I apply for this money? Well, it's really being decided by your local school board and your state school board, sometimes your state legislature, and sometimes your governor. Basically, the money flows from D.C. to the states. States can keep 10% of it. The state education agency can keep 10% of it. The rest goes to the districts under that poverty formula. So then the local school boards make decisions. You may have, there may be an application process at your local school board. In some places, the state is asking the local school boards to get approval for their plans to spend the money. So there's and then also, as I said, the state keeps 10% of the money. Some states are just giving it off to the districts, but some are making, plans. Tennessee, for instance, and this is with the first round, the CARES Act money. The legislature in January approved a plan for after-school summer learning and a big literacy push, and that's using this COVID funding. So there are state legislatures who are deciding how to spend it, but it's usually sort of the bigger issues there. And then, as I said, in the first 2 rounds, the governors have some discretionary funds to spend. That's for higher ed and K12. And in this last round, it's only for private schools. For the visual learners, here's a look at what I just said. So, Congress approves it. It's at the education department. It goes to the governors, then it goes to the school districts and to universities. So really, you're where you want to apply or where you want to talk to the business officer or talk to whoever you typically talk to at the school district, your facilities manager, that would be your transportation manager, that would be who can help you get this money. Now, there's some. This is looking at what some states are doing. If you go to your state website, you may be able to find how much your school district is receiving. There's you can already at the education department, and if you go to my piece that's on Future Ed, you can find state by state breakdown. And there's also a link to a group called Whiteboard Advisors who've done this whole analysis of how much they think every district's going to get in the latest round. So I don't know that that's official, but it's worth looking at. A rule of thumb is if you know how much your district got in the first round, you can multiply it by 4 for the second round, and I don't even know what the number is, a lot more, 10 or something for the third round. So, if you know how much your district got in the first round, it can give you a sense of how much more they're going to get. Let's see. So this, the Association of School Business Officers did a survey of how people are using their money. This is the CARES Act money, and you'll see a lot of it went to purchasing PPE, and a lot of it went to technology and broadband, which makes a lot of sense. This money came to us, to school districts, like a year ago, right when the pandemic was starting. They needed to get devices. They needed to get Wi-Fi hotspots. That was where the concentration of money was going. And we took a look, this is a Future Ed and Hunt Institute analysis. We took a look at how the governors were spending their money, and we found something rather similar. The biggest areas were broadband, remote devices, that sort of thing. And of course, they also spent money on higher education. But then you look at the Business Officer Survey looked again at round 2, and you'll see that learning loss is now the number one thing. This isn't surprising because we're at a different period. We're at a period where we know that kids have been out of school for practically a year, and we need to catch them up. And as I said, the latest round requires spending, it requires this at the state level to spend at least 5% on learning loss, 1% on summer learning, 1% on after school. At the district level, you're supposed to spend 20% on learning loss, and that's at least 20%. So we're going to see that be a big emphasis. So that's my presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Brian, and I'll be around if you all have questions. I hope I didn't confuse everybody, but I'm happy to answer any questions you've got.
Phyllis, thank you so much for that. Great education. Obviously, a lot to decipher there. I think the good news is the federal government appears to have done a great job of moving the money fairly rapidly from Washington through the governor's offices and down to the local level, so much so that we can get detailed numbers down to the exact dollar number of what's available at each of the school districts. So you all can do your research and know what's available in your district as you go and try to request funds for any kind of investment upgrade. We'd like to launch some surveys now. Josh, would you mind launching our first survey to get a sense of the audience's understanding of how COVID dollars, relief dollars, have impacted their district thus far? Okay, super interesting. Has your district received any federal COVID relief funding in the past 12 months? Close to 82% of you, 81% of you said yes, you have. What's interesting of that 18, 19% who haven't is that the data shows, or it should show, that every district has received funding. So it just might not have flowed down, or you might not be aware of it. Or it might not have flowed as rapidly to your district vis-a-vis some of these other districts. But that money was released, a good, last April. So it's had almost a year to work its way to you. So that's a very interesting data point. Can we do flash poll number 2 real quick before we move on in the presentation? Thank you, Josh. So it's always great to get this real-time feedback from everybody, and I appreciate you all giving us this information. It's helpful as we think about how we present to you all, knowing what you have and haven't received, the information you have. Okay, very interesting. Have you applied any of this COVID to student transportation, which is obviously Synovia's specialty? 54% of you, well, it's a moving target here. So about 50% of you have and 50% of you haven't. So that's very interesting. Anecdotally, we know we've worked with customers who've invested in our bus guarding technology for its contact tracing capability using COVID relief dollars. So it's clear out there from the audience that others have used the dollars for this. And we'll come back to the flash poll as we move on. Thank you, everybody, for sharing that information. And thank you especially, Phyllis, for helping us understand how much money truly is out there and how potentially easy it can be to go capture those dollars for your department. I'm going to hand it over now to Andy to talk a little bit more about Synovia and how some of these dollars could be applied to improving student transportation.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks everybody for jumping on today. A little bit of my background is spent almost 20 years in a local school, and my final role there before I left was our technology integration coach and a lot of what I spent my time doing was helping teachers almost dream about what their vision for their classroom could be. What solutions would they find applicable, and helping them understand what their problems were, but then also how they could solve those things. And sometimes, they teachers and everybody gets used to what you currently have, and that's acceptable. And some have had the chalkboard, literally, blackboard with chalk, and that's the solution that they like, and have never considered anything more. And others are dreaming of whiteboards and classroom tablets and all these different things. Well, I think the same can be true from transportation and as well. And so just because the same yellow bus was used 30 years ago doesn't mean that we can't or shouldn't take advantage of some of the new technology pieces that are available. So for those of you who already have GPS in your buses today, you've probably seen the value of being able to know the what and the where each vehicle is doing. And if you've had it for a while, you may have some older technology in there that you might consider upgrading. And then today, I really want to kind of stretch you and make you think about other ways that you can use and leverage the technology available, and especially today with some of these COVID dollars to help attain those goals, just to kind of think about what your future could look like then as well. So specifically, we're going to talk a little bit about contact tracing, which allows you to keep track of which students are on the bus and when and where, and then translating all of that data to parents. And so how much more peace of mind does a parent have knowing A, where the bus is, but then when and where my child got on and off the bus? All of those questions as they're sending their kids off to school. Is the school doing the right thing for my child? Is safety still a primary concern for them? All of those things get answered, number one, by having a plan, but number two, by being transparent with your parent and your community then as well. The other aspect that a lot of transportation departments are concerned with is then your driver safety. As you're trying to especially retain your drivers, but also then to recruit new ones. All of your employees want to know that they're operating in a safe environment and that you're doing everything you can to encourage a safe environment for them, and then to be able to grow with them. And everybody wants to be a part of a program that's being invested in. So some of the tools that we've helped develop to be able to create a safe environment for your drivers then as well. So before we jump into some of those details, just a couple of days ago, 60 Minutes did a piece on a district that we partnered with some time ago in Georgia, and kind of their impact. And unique thing with this district is, CDC being in their backyard, they were able to partner with. So we're going to watch the trailer for it here, but it's a great article if you have a minute. Sam, if you want to go ahead and start that.
This is what going back to school looks like during a pandemic.
Give me your assignment. Let's get on it.
The CDC has been studying this school district to find out how the coronavirus spreads.
When we first started this project with the CDC, I was convinced that we were going to have more transmission in middle and high school classrooms than we had in elementary. What surprised me as we worked through this is that it was actually the exact opposite.
Thank you. So the idea is that we all have kind of some assumptions or hypothesis of what are some of the causes of the struggles that we face as well. So again, that article is great, as their superintendent was really fighting with the right balance of safety and access, and the pressure to bring kids back to school, but to do it in a safe environment. So you can see at the beginning they're using our RFI technology for students scanning on and off the bus. We have got multiple ways to be able to manage that process as well, but a great example of how they're trying to leverage technology to make a safer environment for their students then as well. So one of the things you might be hearing today is regarding the 3G sunset. And so if you're a little bit of background, this might be old news for some of you, but the GPS devices in your buses were, before 2018 roughly, were equipped with either 2G or 3G cellular modems. So as the buses are rolling around, they're reporting in their location over the cellular network. Well, all of those modems are going to be obsolete sometime in 2022. So by carrier, I think AT&T, it's going to sunset in February of 2022, and Verizon, it's in December. So it's going to sunset at different times throughout the year, but they're getting ready for more space on their spectrum. So the ability to have those devices that you may have purchased 5-10 years ago might not be functioning at the end of next year. So make that part of your consideration as you move forward then as well. And as soon as you start thinking about that, all right, well, when will this technology then be obsolete as well? So when is 4G going to sunset? And so I guess I'm less concerned about 4G right now. It's on the same spectrum as 5G. And so the amount of data that's being required to transfer over these modems is pretty minimal. So it's not that it's a bandwidth issue, it's just a room on that cell tower. So 4G, like every technology, eventually will go away, just like your beta and your record players. But the idea is that having a solution in place is going to use it as long as you can as well. So knowing if you already have a piece of technology that you've got a plan for the future then as well. So some of the additional technology I want to kind of stretch you and make you think about is one for contact tracing. So having some method of being able to record when a student enters and exits the bus, and then being able to translate that data and make it expose that to your parents as well. So again, the biggest use case I hear is less about the mom standing by the bus and knowing that the kids walked on it, but less that mom and dad both are off at work before the child gets on the bus. So there's some peace of mind knowing that the bus came and the stop occurred, but there's much more knowing that my child got on the bus. And the same thing in the afternoon. I might not be home when my child gets home from school, but I like the peace of mind knowing when they got off the bus, if they got off at the wrong location, that I'm able to see that. And maybe, like with Synovia, we have tools to be able to prevent the lost child and giving feedback to the driver to let them know that the child is doing something that's out of the norm. All of those pieces then create that, like I said, the peace of mind to parents, knowing that you got a solution in place that's going to allow them to operate in their day without having to worry about some of the basic elements like the safety of their child. And the other piece that our Bus Guardian package allows then is the ability for some of the driver safety then. So we're able to know who the driver was and every other aid or monitor, anybody else that was on that bus with them. We're able to then associate what impact or what contact could they have had with the children or with each other. I hear more examples of drivers spreading infection between each other more than between driver and child or teacher and child. So keeping that in mind is we are oftentimes wrapped up with how close are the kids to each other, but how close is that driver to interacting with, or the parent or the teacher interacting with the student. Another way to limit the exposure is to messaging back and forth. So if drivers don't have to go into a centralized location, they can punch in or log in on the bus and not have to do it in a centralized location, limiting that exposure. And then when it's trying to communicate information to a driver, letting them know of a policy change, whatever, all of those things can be done through a technology device then as well, to be able to communicate and have record of who read it, who's read that message and who hasn't yet. And then communication between your drivers and your mechanics. So if every day that there is a defect, that the driver has to, physically take that failure to the mechanics, now your mechanics are a central point where they're in contact with every driver then as well. And again, being able to create some of those limitations to exposure to allow all of the workflow to occur without putting your drivers at risk is a great tool to be able to leverage as well. So, in my years at the school, a lot of times, the teacher's like, oh, I want this tool. And you've got to be able to put it into a way that is going to, what's your business manager going to look for? And so oftentimes they don't want the single bullet. Just don't tell me the one fix. What problem are we really trying to solve? And so approach it from the standpoint, you need a platform, and ideally a technology platform that's going to expand and grow to whatever your needs are today. So this year, it's about driver safety and student tracking. In 3 years from now, some of those needs might be different. So what you're really looking for is a platform to be able to have that communication, the technology that can continue to serve you as well. When it comes down to then to your business manager, how much is this going to cost? So under most circumstances, the feedback we've gotten from business offices is they want a consistent budget. And so the idea of an upfront cost and then a maintenance fee was much harder for them to budget. And so we have a program that allows for an operating budget where it's a single rate per bus per month, and it's predictable and it's consistent. So that includes the hardware, it includes the service, it includes hosting and mapping and cellular fees. All those things are all a consistent price. This year, if you're getting COVID dollars and that's not a consistent budget you're going to have in 5 years from now, you might want to look at more of a capital purchase, and that upfront cost might fit your budget this year. So now you kind of front load your purchase of the hardware, and then you have a smaller annual license and maintenance then on the hardware moving forward. So depending on which way your business manager wants to fund your program, being able to have some of those tools to provide either one of those options. And then just to kind of give you a ballpark for what we're looking for, our Bus Guardian program today, which is the GPS and the tablet and the scanning for students, and here comes the bus, all of the things we talked about, is at $39 per bus per month. You might be not interested in all of those pieces, and so the range is going to fall from anywhere from $25 to $39 a month for basic GPS, all the way up to all of the features that we've talked about today. If you're looking at more for a budget that is a capital spend, it might fall more into planning of a budget of $1,100 up front, and then $234 a year for those devices after that. So as you're putting together your thoughts and your plan for your business manager, these are kind of just get you thinking about it. A lot of districts I've talked to said they weren't aware that it was really such an affordable option, looking at all the benefits that they're able to get from it. So some people may have been scared off just by intimidation for not even looking at it. But once you've decided that this is a plan you want to move forward with, be happy to obviously put together a plan with you then as well. That's kind of the stretching I want to do with you today. So Brian, why don't you circle us back to the Bus Guardian Hero and our final poll.
Thank you, Andy, and that was a great presentation of all the things you can do with GPS tracking. Some of them are deadline driven, right? So as we think about the CARES Act dollars, you have some deadlines. As you think about the 3G to 4G migration, you have some very real deadlines. Luckily, none of them are next week or next month, so you have time to go out and do your due diligence, work with your internal business team to get all the data together and the pricing together and make an informed decision and informed purchase. So thank you for all that information, Andy. It's really helpful as people think about how to upgrade their fleet with these CARES Act dollars. Again, back to our Bus Guardian Hero, here's just 2 of the 756 nominations we've received in the last 6 weeks. It's really been overwhelming to every single day open my email inbox and see more of these pour in from across the country. I think all of you know this because you live it every day. I sit here in an office and help sell school bus technology, and I visit school bus fleets, and I see the dedication and commitment your people have to the work they do, but I don't see it like you all do. So this has been a really powerful reminder of the incredible commitment that your teams execute every day out there to take care of kids. And I like to think our team is a part of that and helping deliver new technology that makes your bus guardians even better at what they do. So please don't hesitate. We're going to award 4 bus guardians this year. We're going to give them a nice gift card to make their day brighter and hopefully shed some light on the incredible sacrifices that the school bus community, not just drivers, but your mechanics, your back office staff, everyone does to keep the kids in the classroom. With that, I'd like to go to our last survey. If you don't mind, Josh, real briefly before we close it up. Our final flash poll number 3. Now that we know that there are literally hundreds of billions of dollars related to to K12 education, and we know that, on our last poll, we saw that approximately, 50% of you, give or take, spent some of those dollars on student transportation. Well, this is great news. So fantastic to see that 80% of you say yes, you plan to apply some of these COVID dollars to our technologies, or whether it be us or some of our competitors. 90%. When you think about what this money can do, right, it's an investment in the future of not just education, but of safety, of efficiency, of paying your fleet back. When you think about the money you can save in fuel and in smarter routes. So if you use these dollars wisely and you do your research, you can make the argument and make it with a clear conscience that you're using federal dollars to save local and state dollars down the road. And when you look at people like Andy, I think you see that he's got 20 years experience working with school districts himself and helping adopt technology. And he brings that same expertise and understanding of the end customer, which is the student and his family, and giving them the best possible outcome. So great poll data there. Fantastic to see that number goes from 50% to over 90% in terms of using these federal dollars for COVID relief. Back to our slides. We're going to turn it back to Josh and take some questions from the audience. Hopefully you all have some good questions, because we just covered a lot there between the avalanche of funding and the ways you can spend it. Please don't be shy, because both Phyllis and Andy are here to answer your questions.
Thank you, Brian. Let's jump right into the Q&A. Looks like the first question we have is, how does the contact tracing report actually work?
I'll jump on that one. So today your nurse calls you and says Billy was diagnosed last Tuesday. Who was in contact with Billy? And so in Synovia, you would search for Billy Smith, and then say, give me all of the people that Billy was in contact with, starting with last Tuesday. Maybe it was just Tuesday, Wednesday. Maybe it's for the last 7 days. And it will report back to you all of every student who was on the same bus as Billy and how many minutes of primary contact exposure they have, where that child and Billy were on the bus at the same time, versus secondary exposure, where with the students that rode the bus after Billy. So yeah, the concern of secondary transmission issues would surface there then. So we don't track how close they were on the bus together. It's purely how many minutes they spent on the same bus together. And we do also then show what bus they were.
Gotcha. All right, and for the next question, can the student ridership help us perform more accurate reporting for Medicaid reimbursements?
Absolutely. So all of the ridership information then comes into an attendance screen. And so we've got lots of districts today that are taking all of the ridership information. And so what typically happens is, by student, the days and the buses that they rode, and then you hand that over to your special ed department. And so they're eligible for transportation reimbursement on the days that they received Medicaid eligible services. So let's say you took them to school on a day that they didn't receive those services, they may not be eligible on that day. So it kind of works backwards in that they look at the classroom attendance, And if you provided transportation on those days, then you were able to get refund dollars then through Medicaid reimbursement for it. So having that attendance by bus by student is a great way to be able to collect and report that information.
Awesome. Thank you. That was a very helpful answer. Now it looks like the next question our viewer asks, can other employees besides drivers use the payroll functions?
Yeah, so anybody that you have the tablet that allows drivers and then other employees to all log in there. They can also use our mobile device or our mobile app. So there's also a Synovia app that allows any employee to log in and out, clock in and out. You can disable or restrict the mobile access as well. So you have to be within a certain geofence in order for your punches to function. There's also a kiosk mode, so a lot of districts might have a centralized computer that the drivers would log in and out, and then maybe transfer from transportation to food services during midday, that kind of thing. So either one of those is a mode that you can use without actually being on the bus for it as well.
All right, and the next question. What happens when employees forget to punch out on the tablet?
So if somebody clocks in the morning, runs their route, and then they go home without actually punching out, all of the vehicle information is tied to that shift. So it's called a shift exception. And so in Synovia, you'll see a list of all of the incomplete shifts, and you can just match up the ignition off for that incomplete shift from the vehicle that the driver was in, and add in the ending time for the trip that they did.
All right, next question. Are any of these funding sources specific to JPAs that are owned by school districts to provide school bus transportation services?
Phyllis, I'm going to defer to you. JPA is a new acronym to me.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question? I was looking up something about school bus and ventilation and didn't hear what the question was.
Yeah, no problem. Are any of these funding sources specific to JPAs that are owned by school districts to provide school bus transportation services?
Not that I know of. The exception might be the Treasury Department money that's coming through CERTS, which is the Coronavirus Economic Relief for Transportation Services. That was $2 billion approved in the December package. That may have more specificity. That is allowed to be used for school buses as well as motor coaches and other forms of bus transportation. But I don't know anything specific, so.
All right. Next question. Are projects supporting air quality improvements okay for second and third round?
I can answer that too, which is yes. In the second round, and they specifically added ventilation, HVAC systems, and facilities repairs to the allowable uses. And I was just looking up when somebody called in the recent CDC guidance. Recent CDC guidance, they just revised it last week and released it to emphasize ventilation more. It doesn't specifically say ventilation in school buses, but it does talk about PPE and ways to protect kids in school buses. And because ventilation is in the bill or in the measure and school buses are in the measure, it seems to me you could easily use it for air purifier systems or ventilation systems in school buses. And obviously there's a big emphasis on upgrading HVAC systems within school buildings.
All right. For the next question, what does maintenance on the mobile data terminal look like? How often do they need to be fixed or replaced?
The maintenance, there's everything. If there are updates to the device, it's done over the air. And so otherwise, the only time that might need to be fixed or replaced, we've had a couple incidents in the last few years of a student breaking into the bus yard and vandalizing the bus. But otherwise, the CalAmp 7P mobile data terminal we've not had a failure rate. You will have a spare pool of hardware to use if something does malfunction on it, that you swap it out and put in a new one. But otherwise, in terms of maintenance on it, updates and changes to it are done over the air, so there's nothing you need to physically change on it in those instances.
Awesome, that sounds really convenient. And the next question looks like another one for you, Andy. What is the difference between Bus Guardian, Here Comes the Bus, and other Synovia offerings?
So our Synovia base package, we call it core GPS. And as we have different modules like comparative analysis that takes the routing data against the actual time and attendance, Here Comes the Bus are all kind of modules with it. Our Bus Guardian really is just it's a package of multiple of those offerings of services that we've had for years. But as the COVID epidemic, started gaining ground, we were getting the same request over and over again. I need something that's going to, keep my driver tracking for time and attendance. I need to know who is getting on, the students getting on and off. And I want to communicate that information to parents. So we bundled all of those as part of the Bus Guardian. So Bus Guardian includes the tablet and the barcode scanner or RFID scanner, the Here Comes the Bus, comparative analysis, time and attendance, and then also the inspection modules that are part of the tablet as well. So the Bus Guardian package is kind of the everything offering that we can provide to the user.
All right. The next viewer asks, does federal funding have any procurement requirements, for example, RFP, RFQ, for school transit upgrades?
If this is Phyllis, I'm not sure, so I won't try to answer that. I will say there is a provision that if you're going to do a major capital expenditure, it needs to be approved by the state, and in some instances, the state would have to get approval from the federal government. But my sense is that would be like buying a whole fleet of new school buses or building a new school or something like that. I don't think if you're just going through the school district to get them to purchase some technology or upgrade some equipment, I do not think you need an RFP or anything like that, but it may also depend on your school district. So I'm going with I'm not sure.
Okay, and for this next question, it looks like it's another one for you, Phyllis. This viewer asks, can you tell me when I speak to transportation folks, who should I direct their questions to in the financial office on how CARES Act funding may apply to the purchase of air purification systems for school buses?
Again, I think it depends on your school district and how you function. The business officers of the school districts are often the point people, but that position is not always called business officers. In some cases, it could be a facilities manager, it could be your transportation manager, it could be your CFO sort of financial position. If you know somebody or your boss knows somebody on the school board, that's a way into it too. You could get the school board to say, we need our school buses to be safer, or we need better air quality, or whatever your issue is. So don't know that there's a specific person in each community, but I would say that the school business officer, whatever that person's title is the best way in. So that's my thought. Yeah, I don't know if you have other thoughts.
Yeah, there are, if I could just pop in, there are a couple of school bus contractors on this call today, and so I think that's this question is directly for a bus contractor providing services to the school, and they feel obligated to provide those additional, let's say, safety for air quality or student tracking. Are there key indicators that they should be telling the business office at the school to, maybe to change their funding options? I haven't seen anything in the publications specifically for bus contractors on how to get relief dollars. It appears to all flow through the school districts. Is that accurate?
Right. That's my understanding too. That it's the school board or the school board. It controls the money. I have a Google alert on my computer for any time people are discussing ESSER, which is, as I said, the money that flows. And I see every day that some school board or another is approving funding for this or that. So how it gets to the school board, I'm not sure. My sense is it's going through, a business officer or the transportation manager. It seems to me if you're a contractor, you need to say, if you want me to make my buses safe, I'm going to need this, this, and this. And that would seem to be the way to go there. And I think there's an argument to be made too that there are some people who would like to see every teacher get a big raise, but this money runs out in 3 years, and if you give teachers a big raise, or if you hire a bunch of new teachers, what are you going to do after 3 years? I think there's an argument to be made if you can make a upgrade to your technology or the safety of your buses, that has a long-lasting impact and costs money now, but not 3 years from now. As much money.
All right, and the next viewer, they ask, how can I obtain the funds to update my small fleet? I believe they're asking about that process.
The school board process, or?
I believe so.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I would say that would. I think it all goes down to the school board, and or as I said, if you want to pitch a state on a statewide initiative, there were some states who approved money in the first round to do Wi-Fi on buses and parked buses all around the community, and gave kids a lot more access to the internet. That was a statewide initiative. You could if you don't go the local route, if you're a bigger company, you could go the state route and see if you can get the state to, buy some technology or make some new rules or spend some money on school bus safety or whatever your issue is if it's beyond school buses. So those would be the ideas I have. And again, it could be that your local district has some sort of application process, but it's not required, and you would just need to ask your local contacts. I would start by asking them, how is your school board planning to spend, or how is your school district planning to spend this money? And is there a piece of it you can use for this? And this is how much it would cost, and this is how it fits in. The allowable uses include getting kids back to school. They include giving the principal what they need. They include PPE and cleaning. They include ventilation. You can use the allowable uses to make your argument that what you're proposing fits into the, if we're recovering learning loss, getting kids to after-school programs or to and from after-school programs or summer learning programs. Those are issues that they're supposed to spend the money on. So if I were in your position, I would look at the allowable uses and figure out which ones make sense, and then figure out the local school board contact or the state contact, if that makes more sense, and just work it like that.
All right, the next question looks like it's one for Andy. How compatible is Synovia Solutions with other timekeeping systems, in particular Kronos Workforce Ready?
So what we collect in time and attendance is an employee by job, by time spent in that job. So we don't really deal with dollars, we deal with time. And so how and what you export out, and we do integrate with, I'll say, at least a dozen other different payroll systems. We have some that are custom, but most of them fall into our I call our generic export, that you just define what fields you want in what order, and then on whatever frequency you want, you send by employee the hours worked by job type. And so Kronos specifically, we've done several integrations with other customers who use Kronos for payroll. They collect their time in Synovia.
Okay, well, it actually looks like we're getting close to the hour mark here. So, Brian, if you had any closing statements you wanted to make, feel free to do that now, and then I'll conclude.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Josh, and thank you, everybody, for those great questions across both spectrums, the technology and the funding side. I think the most important thing I like to leave everyone with is the sense that there is this incredible opportunity, sadly precipitated by this horrible pandemic we've all just suffered through, but it's left us with this great opportunity to upgrade not just our technology, but the way we do business and the way we take care of each other, take care of our employees, take care of the students. And if you take the time and the energy, you can go out and get the detailed information related to your district to make the argument that what you're doing is part of the activity to bring students back to the classroom they learn best. And so for that, I'm very thankful to Phyllis for agreeing to do this. Obviously, a huge amount of time and effort on her part, but I think you can see the incredible expertise she brings to bear and share with you all today. So thank you very much, Phyllis. And obviously, thank you, Andy, and most of all, thank you to all of you who joined us today and spent your time learning about this. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Josh.
All right, thank you, Brian. Well, that's all the time that we have for today, but for anyone who asked a question that wasn't answered, we will be following up via email to answer your questions individually. We hope that you all enjoyed today's webinar. I want to again thank Brian Mitchell, Phyllis Jordan, and Andy Gall for today's presentation. I also want to mention that an on-demand version of this webinar will be available on the School Bus Fleet website at schoolbusfleet.com/webinars. Thank you and have a great day.